thank you for those joining online. So this was a first part series we came up with and discussing our alumni group, of the alumni of students who have passed through the Blumberg Institute. And realized there's still a lot of information, education that you could garner from professionals working here. And so I offered to give the first one. We even have some employees attending because, this is not just thinking about how to get into college, how to get into graduate medical school. It's partly how to get a job. And I sort of am going to cover all of these things. So I condensed down about 6 hours of lectures into what you're going to see in the next 45 minutes. So we're going to go pretty quick. And, there's things like resumes and CVs, which I love covering, but all the young people I talk to say, Dr. Culp, I know all about how to do a resume. So I review about 200 resumes a year. I'd say 50% of them are really badly done. So even though people say they know how to do resumes, you got to focus on that, because your resume and your college essay or personal statement for medical school or a cover letter for a job, those are the first things people see to begin to evaluate you. And so thinking about how to get those in tip-top shape, we're going to cover a little bit of sort of the essays and personal statements. But have any of you thought of how to create a professional plan, an academic plan? A lot of people saying, well, I'm going to college, right? That's the next step for a lot of high school students. A lot of college students say, well, I'm either going to get a job or I'm going to professional school. Okay, but you have to think about, how am I going to get there? You have to develop a plan to get there and succeed. And not only that, what we're realizing is there's not just IQ, but people want EQ too. So there's the emotional education and the emotional intelligence. And so having both IQ and EQ is very important. And I think some of what I'm going to show you today will help hopefully develop some of the EQ. And a lot of EQ is saying, okay, I have to identify the gaps of where I am and where I want to go, and the gaps in my application process to school, my gaps in my application process to a job. Why can't I get a lab technician job here at the Blumberg? Okay, well, what are my gaps? How am I going to improve them? And the most important thing is how to reflect. I find the most successful people that I have working for me and that I've interacted with can actually reflect, understand what they're good at and where their areas of growth. Where do I need to grow more? And so reflection is something we're going to talk a lot about today. There we go. So one of the parts of developing these professional or academic plans identifies with roadblocks. You have to understand what's preventing you from getting that next job, what's preventing you from getting into a better level school. So talk about roadblocks. And then, once we sort of overcome those roadblocks, there's a marketing video that I want to show you. And I've really taken this to heart. It's by a guy named Simon Sinek, and it's Start With Why. And because when I read resumes, when I read cover letters or personal statements, college essays, you guys always just tell me what you did. I did this, I did this, I did this. There's a lot of I's. You don't tell me why you did it. Once you get down to the why, it starts showing the passion and the beliefs. And when I have those 200 resumes, the students that start with why and explain why they're doing something, why they're passionate about it, why they want to be a doctor, those are more memorable. I can't remember 200 resumes. I'm lucky if I remember 10 of 200. So it's 5% of them I might remember. And usually there's 2 or 3 that really stand out. For your job applications, for your college applications, you want those applications to stand out. And so some of these benefits. There's a reflection model that I really have sort of bought into called the R2C2 model. This was actually developed in residency for medical doctors about how residents interact with patients, how residents interact with other doctors. Because there was a big deficiency in the medical education saying, okay, we've trained these medical doctors. They took 2 years of courses, they're really smart. And then we gave them 2 years of exposure to medicine with clinical rotations during the 3rd and 4th year. Okay, but they didn't know how to reflect, they didn't know how to improve, they didn't know how to say, okay, how am I doing on my interaction with patients, how am I doing in interactions with other doctors? They're part of a healthcare team. Doctors are usually the leader of the healthcare team, but one model. So they came up with this R2C2 model. Actually, it should be R2C3, I'll explain why. And it's really about how to assess your interpersonal relationships, how to work better as a team, and how to reflect. So we're going to talk about that model. And then sort of how to use the starting with why and the R2C2 model and helping develop kind of what kind of plan you're going to go through. And then I was going to go over some of the fundamental things you need to get into college, get into graduate school, get into medical school, get a job, which are your essays and your cover letters. And so I was going to put resumes in there, but hopefully you all can get your resumes going. So part of it is, and then I actually end with time management. I think I mentioned to you, people that manage their time really well and can reflect on where they're spending their time well and where the deficiencies are, that was the #1 attribute for success in the Geisinger Commonwealth School of Medicine. So we did an evaluation of all the medical the MD students, and said, okay, incoming GPA, incoming MCAT scores, nope, those weren't the best doctors. It was actually time management and study skills were the 2 attributes that the best students were. So I hope by the end of this, you'll take all of these different little pieces and sort of put them together and sort of thinking about your study skills and learning styles and sort of create a plan. Okay, my next step that I want to go to is college, is a better college. Okay, what am I going to do there? The other thing that you do is once you're in college, you say, okay, well, I want to go get a job or I want to go to grad school. Well, you should start planning that out in your first or second year of college and not wait till your senior year. I've had a lot of applicants for technician jobs here that say, well, I was really busy in college, so I didn't do any research or get involved in anything. And I say, that's a huge gap in your resume when you're applying for a job here. And I have a bunch of other applicants that have those activities and experiences and exposures. And so, identifying those gaps and coming up with improvement plans. So you don't create an academic or professional plan and say, that's my plan, I'm sticking through it. You have to be able to reflect and assess how you're doing and revise that plan. So common roadblocks to getting into school, to getting into graduate school, college, or getting a job. I mean, it's your GPA. If you're going into science, it's your science GPA, MCAT score. You don't see it too often, but some employers will ask for your GPA. And so those are, the bar that's set. I need a certain level GPA or MCAT for you, most of you here, it's SAT scores, standardized test scores. Standardized tests are going away, just like we have Brexit in England, we're seeing the GRE exit, so people are not requiring the GRE for graduate school as much anymore. So that's being called the Brexit, but that's the bar. And then, okay, but you have to realize that'll get you past maybe the first 50% of the applicants. And I feel like your high school counselors focus on metrics. Metrics, if you have good enough metrics, you'll get into an Ivy League school, you'll get into medical school. Well, at Geisinger, we have 6,000 applications. 3,000 make the metrics. We have only 100 seats in the class. So what do you have to do to be competitive? When I recruit for technician jobs, and you guys have all worked with Brielle and David, I usually get between 60 and 100 applications for one of those positions. And so, and there's usually a dozen or 2 people that would be good and I would want to hire, but I have to find that one. So these are the type of things, talking about your experiences. And I think that's great that you're all here and the people online have alumni have come through the Bloomberg. This is a very valuable experience. This experience you're getting here is a differentiator for you. It makes you stand out. Not many high school kids get to work in professional industry labs, and you get the opportunity to do that. But we talk about personal statement or your college essay. Sometimes there's secondary statements, experiences, letters of recommendations. Certainly if you're applying for a job or you're applying to college, there's often times you can submit additional information after the application is already done. So any updates you do there. But when you're creating your professional plan or learning plan, you should have all of these things done. You should be reflecting on all of these things, and you should seek advice from your peers and your parents and maybe friends, on what they think of all of these. So before I submit any grant, I send my grant to the Vice President of Research, Drew Guo, and my grant to Tim Block. And they read my grants and provide critique before I send it to NIH or the Department of Defense for funding. All of these sort of attributes and experiences that you're putting into your secondary material, you need to have a strategy. You know, I've seen applications to our medical school. There's 3 letters of recommendation from 3 different people, but they say the exact same thing about the applicant. Well, that provided no value to the applicant. The applicant should have gotten 3 different letters of recommendation that focused on different parts of what you're seeing in yourself, and you should have those discussions with the people writing you the letters of recommendation. I need Dr. Culp to focus on my research here. I need one of my teachers at the high school to talk about my academic performance. I volunteer at my church. I want to talk about giving back to community, so I'll get somebody there. You see right away, those 3 letters of recommendation focus on 3 different attributes. The same goes when you're applying for jobs. You usually have to provide 3 references that will talk about you to the potential employer. Don't give 3 of the same people. They're going to say 3 of the same things. You want to show how diverse your experiences and exposures have been, and that way you sort of stand out. And these are what we call being a holistic applicant. So you're a well-rounded applicant. You're going to fit into the team at a job. You're going to fit into a campus at a university. And sort of those are those secondary things that a lot of counselors and people aren't telling the young people that you really need to focus on. So how many of you applied to college this year? Did you have strategies for your letters of recommendation? Yeah, well, hopefully now in grad school or applying for jobs, you'll think more about that. Think about every time you submit a piece of paper, a document, a resume, a reference, that's gonna show back on you, and you should think through, why am I doing that? Why am I selecting this person? This goes into the next part about start with why. Oh, okay, so more about common roadblocks. Strategy. I like to have a strategy in every paper I write, a story I'm gonna tell, a strategy for every grant I write. Without strategy, you're sort of aimlessly going around just saying, well, I'm just gonna ask a person for a letter of recommendation, that'll be good enough. Without strategy, you're not gonna be as effective. When you're writing your college essay, sometimes it's hard to think about your positive attributes and write about yourself, and that leads to writer's block. So I'll talk about this a little later too, but just jotting down, what do you think your attributes are that are gonna make you a good applicant to a university, or what are your attributes that are gonna make you a good physician? So if you're going to college and you're already thinking about a career in medicine, you should be thinking about those attributes. What am I doing? What about myself is an attribute that makes me gonna be a good physician? Do I really like caring and helping people? Do I really like to volunteer? And those are certain attributes that we look for in physicians. And a lot of times you don't recognize, what's unique about yourself. Sometimes it's hard to sort of see inside. And that's why talking with family, talking with friends, talking with your peers is really good, because sometimes they'll say, well, I think you're really good at this, or this is a really core value I see in you. And say, that's interesting. So the more advice you can garner and the more people you can talk to about these different areas really helps out. And then comparing yourself to others, there's no way I can get into an Ivy League school because I don't have the GPA that person has. There was statistics last year, and I focus mostly on medical school, but only 9 out of 10 students that have a 4.0 GPA and perfect standardized test scores get into medical school. Yet about 20 to 30% of people that have subpar GPAs and subpar standardized tests get in. So sort of those differentiators about sort of comparing yourself. Just, don't compare yourself to other people. I don't have a good GPA. Focus on yourself and improving yourself and your gaps. Okay, so now we're going to do about 5 minutes of this video that I really like. This version of it's 18 minutes. I think the full length one is 20 or 26. And I recommend you watch this all. So he starts off with talking about what makes good leaders and goes into why you should start with why. I have to say, I started taking this approach of starting with why in all of my grants, and my funding rate went up quite a lot. I was getting 1 in 4 grants, now I'm getting 1 in every other, 1 in every 3, where the average is 10%. So most people get 1 in 10. And so this has sort of really helped me, because it sort of helps you brand yourself, think about yourself, and it's born into human physiology about the way we think. Our decision making, part of our brain, is very rational and doesn't have be able to vocalize those reasons for making choices. And so he talks a little bit about this now.
Call it the golden circle. Why, how, what? This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And why should anyone care? Well, as a result, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate is from the outside in. It's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. Let me give you an example. I use Apple because they're easy to understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Meh. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done, that's how most sales is done, and that's how most of us communicate interpersonally. We say what we do, we say how we're different or how we're better, and we expect some sort of behavior, a purchase, a vote, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients. We have, we always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? You're ready to buy a computer from me. All I did was reverse the order of the information. What it proves to us is that people don't buy what you do, people buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. This explains why every single person in this room is perfectly comfortable buying a computer from Apple. But we're also perfectly comfortable buying an MP3 player from Apple, or a phone from Apple, or a DVR from Apple. But as I said before, Apple's just a computer company. There's nothing that distinguishes them structurally from any of their competitors. Their competitors are all equally qualified to make all of these products. In fact, they tried. A few years ago, Gateway came out with flat screen TVs. They're eminently qualified to make flat screen TVs. They've been making flat screen monitors for years. Nobody bought one. And Dell came out with MP3 players and PDAs. And they make great quality products, and they can make perfectly well-designed products, and nobody bought one. In fact, talking about it now, we can't even imagine buying an MP3 player from Dell. Why would you buy an MP3 player from a computer company? But we do it every day. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. The goal is not to do business with everybody who needs what you have. The goal is to do business with people who believe what you believe. Here's the best part. None of what I'm telling you is my opinion. It's all grounded in the tenets of biology, not psychology, biology. If you look at a cross-section of the human brain, looking from the top down, what you see is the human brain is actually broken into three major components that correlate perfectly with the golden circle. Our newest brain, our Homo sapien brain, our neocortex, corresponds with the what level. The neocortex is responsible for all of our rational and analytical thought and language. The middle two sections make up our limbic brains, and our limbic brains are responsible for all of our feelings, like trust and loyalty. It's also responsible for all human behavior, all decision-making, and it has no capacity for language. In other words, when we communicate from the outside in, yes, people can understand vast amounts of complicated information like features and benefits and facts and figures. It just doesn't drive behavior. When we communicate from the inside out, we're talking directly to the part of the brain that controls behavior, and then we allow people to rationalize it with the tangible things we say and do. This is where gut decisions come from. Sometimes you can give somebody all the facts and figures, and you say, I know what all the facts and details say, but it just doesn't feel right. Why would we use that verb? It doesn't feel right, because the part of the brain that controls decision-making doesn't control language. And the best we can muster up is, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. Or sometimes you say you're leading with your heart, or you're leading with your soul. Well, I hate to break it to you, those aren't other body parts controlling your behavior. It's all happening here in your limbic brain, the part of the brain that controls decision-making and not language. But if you don't know why you do what you do, and people respond to why you do what you do, then how will you ever get people to vote for you or buy something from you, or more importantly, be loyal and want to be a part of what it is that you do? Again, the goal is not just to sell people who need.
So that is a bit of a marketing and talks about inspirational leaders, but I'm telling you, I've really brought that into almost every aspect, from the company I'm CEO of here, being dean of the medical school and having to manage a dozen faculty and 50 odd students. When I send out a message and I believe in that message, then people really start believing in my beliefs and really start getting involved and start showing passion, instead of just saying, what do? I develop software. That's kind of boring, right? Why do I do it? I'm trying to develop better, safer, more effective drugs. How am I doing that? By developing software and making it easy to use. So you see how it just inverts the information and it becomes so much more compelling? And I can't tell you, I've done this so much now, I can even see it when I'm looking at resumes, and I don't think that many people know about this. Some people just consciously do it, invert the information and start with why. I've seen a ton of people come through here and they say, research intern at the biotech center. I've dyed cells looking at cell death for apoptosis and necroptosis. That is what we did. Why do you do that? Why are you looking at cell death? Invert the information. And another example is I ran a bunch of ELISA assays looking for drugs to treat hepatitis B. Okay, that's what you did. Why you did it. Let's start with why. Over 250 million people worldwide are infected with chronic hepatitis B, which leads to liver cancer. To address that, I searched for drugs using an ELISA assay in the lab. You see right away that's why. And so now I'm looking through my 200 resumes that I have to go through a year. And those students that start with why, those are the sentences and those are the bullet points on resumes and CVs that I see that are memorable. So I actually start to see it even in younger people, that people that start with why, it just is more appealing to me and it's more memorable. And that's how, out of 3,000 applicants, you can stand out to be the 100 that gets accepted, one of the 100 that gets accepted. So, and that's just this Apple quote. I just like that. This is the point. Luckily, I do this enough. I can tell when somebody new comes on, hasn't read the chat bar that says please mute yourself. But yeah, please keep yourself muted if you're online, just so we don't get feedback and it's a little easier to hear. Okay, so now we talked with why. So now you have to start thinking about why you do things. So let's now jump to an evidence-based model of sort of evaluating your interpersonal skills and trying to figure out what are your attributes and what do you believe in and what are you passionate about. Because it's hard to fake. I mean, I've seen, medical school essays that, I want to be a physician because of X, Y, and Z. And you can read through the lines and see that they don't truly believe it. You have to believe in something. You have to be passionate about it. And when you're not, it's hard to fake. I can tell you can say, well, how would you know? You're reading a one-page thing. Well, now that I've done probably almost 1,000 of them, it's getting easier to sort of read through the lines and see when people are passionate. I don't think I'm 100% correct. There's obviously false positives and false negatives in there. But generally, you can start to read through the lines and see what people truly believe in and are rational about. So this comes from residency medical education, where they're trying to improve their residents' sort of personal interactions and skills, not necessarily science skills, because there's always the science of what we do, but there's always the art of what we do. Just like we talk about pipetting. Well, I can tell you all the pipettes, different sizes and how to do it, but when do you have to turn things up on a 45-degree angle? Why not use a 30-degree angle? How far do you put in the pipette? What speeds are you using? That's all the art that we practice, not necessarily the facts and science. So this really helps out more with the art aspects. The first part, so this model comes in 4 different parts. The first is about relationship building. anywhere you go, college, high school, to a job, to an internship, you're building relationships. So how do you build those relationships? How do you get started? You know, what are those initial interactions like? You know, when you first meet somebody, that's oftentimes a memorable moment. So thinking about how we build relationships. The second one is the reactions. You know, how do you react to somebody giving you feedback? How do you react to meeting somebody for the first time? And, you know, in medicine, how do you react to a patient? Because patients will say all sorts of things. And so how do you react? And is it appropriate? Have you done the best thinking about it? How do you react to a senior physician giving you advice? How do you react to another resident, you know, giving you advice? So, you know, exploring reactions is the second part. Your reactions and other people's reactions. How do they react to me? Did I come off too egotistical? Did I come off, you know, too pushy? Was I too quiet? Did I stare at the ground a lot? So thinking about all of those aspects and then understanding. This is sort of where the reflection comes in, is that, you know, you have to say, you know, be able to sort of reflect back and understand, well, what did I do that kind of messed up that interaction? Or what did I do that really turned that patient off that they didn't want to come back to my office and see me again? So it's sort of that understanding and reflection is a key component. And in my opinion, it's the one that people have the hardest time doing, and most people can't do, is understand and reflect to try to improve themselves and get better. So I think it's one of the, you know, one of the most important of these 4 steps is sort of understanding. And then the last one is what they call coaching, but you know, I think of it as sort of improvement. You know, okay, I had a bad interaction, or people say I'm too quiet when I first meet them, or my eye contact is really weird, or, you know, stand with my hands folded, which gives me a bad body posture. So how can I change that? What would be my plan for changing it? Okay, well, maybe I'll go try to meet 3 new people today. Just say hi to people in the grocery store. And I'm just going to practice. Practice makes perfect. You have to think of a plan and think about those things that you're trying to understand and reflect on, and then talk to people. Talk to somebody. Maybe your uncle is really outgoing, and be like, you know, what are your advice that you can give me? You know, how did you sort of become so extroverted when I feel so introverted all the time? Or, you know, you see somebody in school be like, how are you just acing all these exams? I'm studying my butt off and I'm only getting B's. Are you creating cheat sheets? Are you, you know, highlighting the book a lot? You know, and that what they do might not work for you, but the more people you talk to, the more professors you talk to, the more coaching you get, the better you'll get at these things, and the better you'll be able to improve your learning and your interpersonal skills in the real world. So also, for at least the people that are here in person, including the working professionals and the parents that decided to join, if you guys have any questions or want to stop me at any time, don't feel like I just have to keep talking and lecturing. You know, with my pharmacology class, I lecture for 3 hours, so I can keep going, you know. But if you have any questions, feel free. And I'll periodically check the chat bar, so if people online have any questions, feel free to type it in the chat bar, and I'll try to periodically look at it so we don't miss anything there. Okay, with that, any questions? You guys ever thought about how you interact with other people, what kind of reactions you get, how it might improve your learning and your self-understanding? Have you guys done any assessment tests of what kind of learner you are? Are you a visual learner? Do you like highlighting your book a lot? So these are all the things that we iterate constantly with medical students, because medical students are getting a ton of information thrown at them very quickly, and they have to be flexible and adapt to these different things. And, you know, the way you learn immunology might be different than the way you learn pharmacology. Maybe immunology, it's very visual, or pharmacology, it's a lot of, you know, drug names and adverse effects and uses and doses. And so maybe creating matrices of that information might help you learn that more. Or maybe it's the reverse. So you just have to think about all those things to be able to reflect. And we say, as you start to go off to college, is don't do that at the end of the semester. You should do that after your first examination. What worked well? What didn't work well? How am I studying? How can I adapt? How can I change? How are my interactions with my other fellow students? You know, how am I building relationships? It's all very important. So this is just why they call it the R2C2 model, because you build a report, or you build connections, relationships. So R You explore reactions to those relationships. You think about your reactions with classmates, professors, peers, coworkers. So then there's 2 R's, and then you sort of understand or explore sort of the content of those interactions, C, and then coach for change, another C. So they call it R2, C2. It could be R2, C3, since there's 3 C's there. But anyway, this is where I got this information from. And I think this has been really good. I haven't practiced this as much as saying why. This is sort of newer to me. But I think it's very valuable. So here's how, okay, so Dr. Culp told us what the model is, but how would we really use the model? And why are you using this model? To get better, improve yourself, improve your learning, improve your relationships, get promotions. That would be the why of why you're doing this. But sort of, how you get there, do you want to build new relationships or build established relationships or increase relationships? So explore sort of reactions, in this example, I want to talk about professional development and academic development plans. I talked with Dr. Block about what are my professional plans. Okay, I've been getting grants in the $250,000, $100,000. So I've never broken the $1 million grant from the federal government. How do I get that? Why do I want to do it? I want to be successful and have federal funding. And so 2 years ago, I got my first $1.5 million grant from the federal government. So, but I had to come up with a plan to do it. I can't just say, hey, I'm going to go and do that. So for me, Dr. Block is a great mentor, and I use him to review these things. So, not only reviewing the plans myself, which I have plans for professional goals that I want to achieve, but, then talking with other people and reviewing those plans. So, are there any changes? Are there any surprises? I mean, your plan should not be, I want to get into college, right? It should be more detailed than that. And then sort of, we call it the portfolio. So this is your portfolio. It's your professional plan, your academic plan, your experiences, your exposure. It's the people you found to be your mentors and write these letters of recommendation. This is your portfolio as you're defining yourself as a student and then eventually as a professional. So as you're developing your portfolio and your professional development plan, learning development plan, is there something that's missing? Do I need to go in a new direction? If I'm really interested in neuroscience, okay, I've done all biology lab here. How could I shift or pivot and actually think about doing some neuroscience work? And so you always have to be reviewing these plans and coming up with sort of new ways and new areas you might have to go into. I mean, one thing I looked at is I typically do human and health services. It's a department of HHS, and the National Institutes of Health, NIH, is where I've applied for most of my funding. Well, Dr. Block pushed me and said, okay, it's going to be harder, but what about the Department of Defense? How about the grants there? Okay, I wanted to do medicine. They don't do as much of medicine, but are there any new areas I need to focus on? And their grants were totally different. I submitted a few. I didn't get any. There's also the National Science Foundation. I had to start focusing on them to really go and broaden my potential of different grant funding agencies. So it wasn't fun to do because I know how to do NIH grants. I didn't know how to do these other grants, but I had to learn because I really wanted to get larger grants. And then are there any new goals? I mean, daunting, but could I actually get a $10 million grant, $20 million grant? I don't know. The 1 million was pretty hard to get, but those are the stages that these sort of grants come in. So I've moved up from the 100,000s to the $1 million. The next jump would be a 10 or $20 million. I'm not there yet. I want to get better at just the $1 million grants, but have new goals. Why not have goals? Things you want to strive for in life. Who can help you with those goals? Who's gotten those big grants before? What might get in the way? What might be some roadblocks for me getting those grants? I mean, I got to think about those things. I have plans for how to address those things. I see gaps in me being able to get larger grants, and so I'm sort of working on all of those things. But if I don't have a plan, I would never achieve any of this stuff. And so I think this is a pretty cool model for actually achieving your goals in life and creating good plans. So now, sort of, again, what would be the next steps and maybe one of your academic plans? I really think one of the first things you need to do is think about your skills, experiences, and attributes. I've always said I think the 2 most important things to do, obviously outside of keeping a high GPA and standardized test scores, but finding a good mentor and getting experience and exposure. So without a good mentor, if you wanted to go into law, I've never been in the lawyer's office. I don't know what it's like to be a lawyer. Well, that looks weak on any application or trying to get a job in a lawyer's office. So go out and find a lawyer, ask to shadow them, maybe just talk to them for an hour, and start describing your core sort of values and skills and interests. And so I sort of jumped into the second one, more career exploration. Like, I really like science because it's super challenging. Well, I think it's great that you all came here, and the alumni online and students in the classroom here came here to get some career exploration, but don't think this is the end. And don't think this should be the only opportunity you should be exploring right now. You should be exploring multiple different opportunities to get as many experience and exposure. And it will help you sort of refine, because this is an iterative cycle that feeds back on your core and value. You sort of learn probably a little bit about yourself and what you're interested in here. But if you went and worked for a different company doing, science or medical work at the hospital, you might learn more about your core values and skills and interests. And putting it all together and keeping track of it. I can't tell you how many students do an activity and then I never see it in their resume, their college essay, or they just say, oh yeah, I kind of forgot about that. I did it a year and a half ago. So I spent 5 years in the Office of Naval Research doing Department of Defense research, and we called it bean counting. Every talk you gave, every poster you gave, every contribution you had, so obviously you publish articles, get grants, but if somebody recognizes you as helping them in a manuscript, you get a little acknowledgement. You don't ever put those on a resume or CV. You just put usually your top presentations. I mean, if I listed all mine, I probably have over 100 presentations I've given. I can't list those. It'll just be overly verbose and nobody will ever get through my CV. So I list a few of those, but I have a backup copy of my CV or my resume where I detail out every single thing I've ever done. And then for different applications, I say, well, that's an activity that I think they would be really interested in. So then I can pull from that. So keeping a cumulative sort of document of sort of every activity you've done, and then you can go back and pull from that if you need to pull it in. And all of those experiences and exposures, that's what your teachers, your counselors, your family and friends are for. You've heard me say that before. A lot of people say, I went to college, I didn't do any research, your professors are there to sort of help you out and guide you. If you're interested in neuroscience, you should be talking to the neuroscience professor in the class. But teachers and counselors, that's what they're there for. But if you walk up and you don't have any strategy, we go back to strategy. Going into a meeting, I just want career advice. You're not going to get much. You have to say, here's my resume. Can you look it over and what do you think I need to fill in to be more competitive to get a position in your laboratory? That's where you'll get true value out. And, have a personal mission statement. Like, what is your mission? I see this periodically, mission statements in the top of resumes. And I think it's kind of interesting. I don't always like it, but if you don't want to use it in your resume, don't. But you should have a mission statement. What is your mission right now? Just to get into college. Well, why get into college? And write that mission statement out, and it'll help you, again, reflect back on all of these things from your attributes and your experiences. Okay, pause there. In the last maybe 10 minutes, I'm just going to highlight some things about essays. So this is going to cover your college essays. The graduate or medical school, we call them personal statements and cover letters. Those are all sort of intro documents to yourself and very important. And a lot of times it's the first thing I look at before I look at your resume for a job. If you apply for admissions to my medical school, we're told don't even look at their MCAT or GPA scores because admissions said we were not sending you anybody that didn't make our bar. So these are usually the first thing I look at. When Susanna prints them out for me and puts them on my desk, it's usually the cover letter and then the resume underneath. So this is the first thing my eyes fall on when I'm looking at your application, medical school, or application for a job here, or an application for our college program. And in my opinion, 50% of resumes that are on my desk are bad. Probably 75% of cover letters are bad. They're either generic and haven't been customized to the position, they're poorly written, or they don't seem to have any strategy. Or they say the exact same thing that I see in the resume. What's the same thing of just highlighting your points of your resume, and then I turn and I look at your resume, and it says the exact same thing that I just read. right? You have to be holistic, show all of your different experiences, and don't be repetitive. You know, whether it's school, you're sort of giving them an insight into your personality. And as a person who sits on the admissions committee, I think about, okay, I'm getting an idea of your personality. Are you a good fit for our medical school? So that's the assessment I'm doing on the back end. You should be thinking about that too as you're writing these documents and submitting them for a job. All right, let me think about, put my feet in the employer's shoes. How would he view this document and what is he looking for? You know, and I always tell students, stay away from negative things. If you know, a lot of students say, I had that one really bad year in college, my sophomore year was really hard, and that's when my grades really stunk, but I bounced back junior or senior year. You know, there's, what I just said, there's a lot of negative words, you know, versus, you know, due to taking extra classes or due to the increase in rigor of my classes, I realized I had a lot of room for growth. And that's why I pivoted, and my junior and senior year, my grades significantly increased. See, I didn't say bad or I didn't, you know, grades were horrible. I didn't use any of those negative connotations, but I still explained the same situation in a positive way. And the way I just explained it, it showed I reflected and was able to grow from there, which are positive attributes that as a reviewer, I'd say, oh, wow, that's great reflection and great that you realize there are areas for growth, and he or she is on the correct trajectory there. But yeah, when people start putting negative words in, it never makes me feel good reading negativity. I understand sometimes there's struggles, or maybe sometimes it's, I've had a gap of a year of employment in my career. Don't use negative words. There's always a positive way to phrase it while still identifying it. But sometimes you have to. If I see an application and they don't say anything about their sophomore year where they did really bad, that's just a flag on their application, because I say, well, why did they do that? I don't have any idea. Or if they're applying for a job and there's a year gap in employment and they don't write anything about it in their cover letter. Well, why? Why? It makes no sense to me. And it just puts a flag on. So if you have something, you know, that you view as negative, don't use negative words, and spin it as a positive, and make sure you explain it. And that's what's fun about these documents, is that it's your chance to explain anything you want. You know, this is your chance to tell them anything. Your college essay is up to you. You can write about anything you want. So that's what's fun about these documents. And reading them, they're all usually very different. So I would write down, again, like this is a little graphic from a medical school about what attributes apply well for aspiring physicians, but you know, I would start creating a list of attributes and writing them down, create these Venn diagrams, and say, well, these attributes of mine make for an inspirational leader. So I have one circle there. These attributes of mine make me a rigorous scientist, so I'd circle there. Going into medicine, maybe you want to think about, you know, professionalism or career enhancement, be a healer, do that. And I'm going to be posting all the slides and the video of this, so you don't need to take pictures, but you can if you want to review it, or Susanna will be sending it out. So yeah, so I have a list of attributes, and I think about, you know, well, what other attributes make for a really good, rigorous scientist? Well, one nobody told me about was you have to be at least a decent writer. So I always just cruise through English classes saying, I'm going to be a scientist and a researcher. I don't need to write. I spend a lot of my time writing ransom papers. And so it wasn't until graduate school, and nobody coached me, nobody told me this, all of a sudden I was being asked to write papers. And saying, I never focused too much on being a good writer. I wanted to be a scientist. So then I had to reflect on that and identify, okay, well, how do I be a good writer? How do I become a good writer? And so, you know, there was tutors that we could get at NYU, and so I would go get tutored, and they would read over my papers and help me write. I asked the tutors what books I should read or what books they use in their undergraduate classes, and I just taught myself, and that's being sort of a self-directed. Nobody told me I had to do that, but I realized that was a gap in my career exploration that I needed to fill, and that if I was going to be successful, I needed to do that. So I showed that I was a self-directed learner and sort of lifelong learner, that I'm continually trying to work on my writing and be, you know, even better. So, but you have to write your own attributes. You know, I think part of the reason I've been able to be so successful is because I sort of done these things. Sometimes I didn't know why I was doing these things, but I sort of did them. And as I've sort of grown in sort of mid-career now, I'm providing a better framework for why you do these things and the results in getting into better schools or career professionalism. So this is a strategy I go for. I don't know if everyone likes it, but when I'm reading 200 cover letters or 200 college essays or 200 personal statements, I'm often skimming. So I even do this in my grants because grant reviewers have way too many grants to read. So I know they're not thoroughly going down through the document. So I actually start each sentence with a topic sentence that says, this is what essentially this next paragraph is going to tell you about. So that way, if you're going quick through a document, you can read that first topic sentence and say, okay, is this a paragraph I want to read, or should I just skip it because I kind of know the history of hepatitis B? I really want to see what their experiments are. So, write a topic sentence for each paragraph, write a first draft, feedback, reflect and revise. I mean, I know this is stuff you probably do for your college essays. You've had family or friends read them over, but, really reflect on it. And I think sometimes say, well, I know Dr. Cope, I have to go revise it. Not just revise it, but really reflect, think about your attributes, think about the strategy behind it. And I think if you focus on strategy and attributes in these documents, you'll sort of realize where the rooms for growth are. And again, this was for medical school, sort of what attributes, must you show as a physician versus what attributes you want. So sort of 3 prompts to kind of get people going on, why is your choose in the professional career, or why do you want to go to this college? What are your marketable attributes? I always talk about experiences. Do you have any special knowledge? This is all of these things are differentiators, right? Your experiences, your time here, it differentiates you. Accomplishments, certificates. When we get applications for medical school, certainly somebody that's certified in CPR, it's like a couple-hour training. Then there's somebody certified in EMT. Those certifications and special skills differentiate applicants for us versus somebody who said, well, I just got a good GPA and went to an undergraduate institution and now I'm applying. So think about trying to acquire those additional certifications or degrees, make you more competitive. So some of the attributes that I really like to see, leadership skills. Even if I'm hiring a technician that's just working by themselves, I want somebody that has some leadership skills. I need them, because leaders tend to be more self-directed. I manage so many people that I can't micromanage them and tell them exactly what to do every day. If there's a problem in the lab, I need David and Brielle to help solve it before they say, Dr. Culp, I need an hour of your time to help solve this problem. And so really leadership skills is something that you should have a section on your resume. You could write it into your college essays or cover letters. Time management, I talked about how time management and study skills really help people be successful. Hands-on skills, certainly if I'm going to hire somebody to run a lab that does tissue culture, I like to see that you have tissue culture. So thinking about getting those hands-on skills. And these are some of the other ones that I look for. And you can see, a lot of the technicians that come work for me, well, they need to be able to teach the rest of you how to do experiments. So I look for teaching skills. But even when I'm hiring people at my company, if they were a tutor in college or they ran their peer review group, so sometimes our medical students just create their own groups of 3-4 students, and usually there's one that organizes the time and leads that. Those teaching skills, we find that if you can explain something to your peers, or you can explain something to people with lower education than you, it shows you've really understood. So that is always a key attribute that I always look for in a lot of the positions that I hire. So team building skills, nobody works in a silo anymore. You work in teams, whether you work in research teams, whether you work in healthcare teams. So teamwork, team dynamic, what kind of person are you? What kind of things are you going to add to the team? And so these are some of the other sort of skills. So, all right, real quickly, the last couple minutes, introduction, body, closer. A lot of these documents don't have a good ending. I don't know if you guys don't, like I said, 75% of these personal statements, college essays, medical school applications, or job applications, cover letters, just kind of end with no end, just kind of tail out at the end, look for a call to action button, like, I really want this job. Please, I'm available anytime for an interview call, right? That's a call to action and a great way to end a lot of these documents, or a college essay might be, I'm really excited about going to your school and I look forward to visiting soon. Okay, they're showing a lot of interest coming and visiting. So call to action just is more memorable instead of just sort of tailing out. Okay, common mistakes that I see. I talked about rehashing. This is probably one of the most common mistakes that I see. I'm going to look at your resume. So for those of you who don't know, CV is curriculum vitae. It stands for life's work. Usually once you have a master's or a terminal degree, doctorate, then we call them CVs, but they're essentially resumes. I don't need the same thing in your cover letter or personal statement. You should have a different strategy. A lot of them are poorly written. A lot of them say, well, if I write a lot, that it'll be more impressive. Well, think about it. Jobs are getting hundreds of applicants for jobs. I can't read a 3-page cover letter. Keep your cover letter down to a page or less. I'm not even that good at writing, but I see a lot of really poorly written, lack of flow, structure, no transition between paragraphs. I mean, just really common stuff. And a lot of times, my grammar is not that great. But you know where I get a lot? I know people that are really good grammar. So I ask them to read my documents before I send my papers out for publication or before I submit my grants. So just utilize those resources and don't be afraid to have somebody read some of these documents. And so, like I said, making excuses about why you were out of the job or why you had a bad year in college when you're playing. Don't make excuses. Turn it into an area of growth and why you're being successful. And this is the other one. This one, I haven't figured out exactly how to say, but I've had job applicants that say, yeah, one of my key skills, and a lot of resumes have skills section, is running an ELISA assay. And okay, well, that's something we sometimes do a lot here. We did a lot more, my lab did a lot more of it a few years ago. This person listed as a skill, I invite them in for an interview, which actually now I usually do phone interview than in-person interview to lessen my burden, because usually within the first couple of minutes, I can tell whether I'm interested in interviewing the person face to face. But they list the skills at ELISA. And then I'll ask them, well, what type of ELISA do you run? What? There's 4 types of ELISA, right? So don't list as a skill, exaggerate, unless you can talk confidently about it. And I've also had the inverse, where somebody lists skill as an ELISA, and then they say, well, Dr. Pell, just let you know, I only did it once in my undergraduate lab. But here's what I did. Here was the experiment. So here was the type of ELISA. I didn't study the other types, so I don't know how many there are. But right away, that person talked so confidently about it, I said, okay, I'm potentially interested in hiring this person. So versus the people that exaggerate, they pretty much get shuffled to the bottom of the deck, which is not what you want to do. Okay, so feedback, reflection, and revision. I mean, I feel a lot of young people are afraid to get feedback. They don't know how to ask for feedback. And then once they get the feedback, they either discard it or don't really focus on it. Think about that R2C2 model. I mean, that's not only of interpersonal interactions, but can be used on all of your documentation. You got to reflect on it, think on it, and don't get bummed out or be negative. So I send my papers out to friends for critique to make them as top-notch as I can before I submit them. I've had some friends be like, I think that experiment was really badly done. And I can feel, oh man, I didn't design a good experiment, I got really bad. Or I could say, okay, well, he thought that, I thought it was good at the time. Why might he think this isn't a good experiment? All right, let me try rerunning it this way and see sort of what he thinks. So I didn't take it as negative feedback. He's trying to help me out, right? I garner and ask for that critique, and so you have to be willing to accept it and reflect on it and understand. Sometimes on my papers, I ask 3 friends for comments and say three different things about one experiment. So, okay, he says this, he says this, he says this. Okay, this is my paper, this is my research. What do I want it to show? What do I want it to do? So I have to reflect and then decide what you want to do. And it goes back to those attributes and your values. If you define those for yourself, it makes it easier to make decisions about where you want to go. Okay, I'm just going to skip down to the end. We can push the last. Yeah, I thought combining 6 hours was way too much. I'm going to go So core competencies, think about what some of the core competencies you might do in college. These are how we evaluate medical students and residents. Those are core competencies. They actually get graded, standardized forms. It helps define where you're going to get a job as a physician. Cover letters, it's pretty similar to the personal statements I went over. There were just some slight differences. Time management, I think time management skills is one of the best things for a student or an employee. When you manage your time well, you can sort of direct yourself to learn. There's a new experiment, like a transfection Miranda has to do. Brielle doesn't know how to do it, but Brielle's a self-directed learner. She can go and get the information and figure it out. And those are the type of employees, the type of students that I want. And so those skills, if you have them, are so key to success, in my opinion. And there's always short-term and long-term planning. How do I plan for this semester? How do I plan for next year? And how you're good at that. Making list of all assignments, reviewing that list, prioritizing that list. I mean, my list of work of things I have to do is always too long. So on a weekly basis, I reorganize my list of things I'm trying to accomplish this week, and then I have to reprioritize. Like, this lecture has been on the list for a long time, but until the end of last week, it wasn't a priority, but then I had to reprioritize it to make sure I got this lecture done for today. And some 4 steps to effective time management. And so planning and setting priorities, I do that on a weekly basis. Sometimes I do that on a daily basis, like what are my priorities for today? What are the most important things to work on? Developing a schedule. Okay, I work on that this morning for 2 hours. What am I going to be available to do afterwards? I mean, if I just walk in and say, I'm just going to start working, I'm not as effective and my productivity is not as low. When my time management got better, my productivity significantly increased. Minimize life's distractions. I mean, I have 3 kids. I coach soccer. I have a lot of distractions, but trying to minimize those and find ones to go. I consult for about half a different companies. There's a holiday party today. I'm minimizing that because I really want to get a lot of work done before the holiday. So even though going to the holiday party would be fun. So you just sort of have to make those judgments. And you create a schedule. This is the schedule we have our medical students do. It's every hour. When I was in the United States military, once a year, they would have us report for 2 weeks what we did every 15 minutes in the day. And we would meet with our supervisor to figure out how we could optimize it to increase our productivity. But we have all of our medical students do this, Do you study better in the morning? Do you study better at night? And then as that last bullet point said, live the schedule. Like, make sure you stick to the schedule and say, okay, Saturday morning was supposed to be study time, and I was up too late Friday night, or there's a football game I want to go do. Understand, if you're substituting out those 4 hours of study, you have to get that back somewhere. You can't just let that go. So time management skills, number 1 attribute. Time management was sort of reflection of self-directed learning. Number 1 attribute for success in our medical school. Like I said, the U.S. military makes us do this on 15-minute time increments a day to increase our productivity. If you've never made one of these, it's in the PowerPoint. You can print it out or just Google it. Just make one of them. Think about your time management and productivity. So I'm a CEO of a company of about 7 people. I'm a dean for medical school. I manage about a dozen professors and a couple dozen students. I've managed 3 different high school training programs. I'm personally managing 10 projects this semester. And so everybody always comes up to me and says, Dr. Earl, how do you manage so many things? Well, 1 is I hire really good people. Some of the beliefs of hiring people you've heard today. But 2 is that you have to manage your time really well. Like, there's no way I can do it. And I coach all 3 of my good soccer teams, right? I mean, there's a lot. The only way you can do it is to be very productive and maximize your time. So I hopefully today have given you some ideas about, what I've been successful in my view of the world. But remember, this is just my view. This is 1 point of view. I always suggest you should get 3 points of view on things. If you want to talk about time management, talk to 3 different people about time management. This is my view of the world, but to get different points of view, reflect, think about yourself. Well, what is time management to me and how important it is and how much do I want to focus on it? But if you get good at this, you'll be really successful in college, graduate school, and then profession. Okay, and then for those of you online, if you haven't been to visit us in a while, please come back. We like having our alumni. And I did pretty well. I had to go a little fast at the end, but I'm usually pretty good. Another good skill is not lecturing long over your intended deadline or end time. Because that's one thing scientists are really bad at. I hate when I go to an hour lecture and it's an hour and a half in and we're still going. So. All right, questions? Yeah.
You talked about like the gaps in like your resume and like who you are. Like what other than like, I know you said like consulting others, but is there any other like means of identifying those gaps in?
You have to come up with your resume, sit with somebody like me, define what career path you're on. If you go say, I want to go be a lawyer, where are my gaps? I'm going to say, I'm not qualified to evaluate that.
Yeah.
You know, general holistic applicant to college, I could probably do. I function mostly more at the graduate and medical school level, so I'm even not that qualified at that. But you know, if you have somebody that you know that's a college professor, somebody that you know has been on a college admissions, you take your documentation to them. And that's where finding a mentor or finding somebody to go to advice, you take the documents to them and say, what am I missing? So that's where I've been on the medical school admissions committee. So I've seen what they look for. I can talk very competently about that. I've never been on the college admissions committee. So, you know, finding people to look at your documentation, and it should just start with your parents. The parents should be looking at the documentation and giving their 2 cents about, and the parents should give their 2 cents, but allow their children to make the decisions of how they want to fill those gaps. The parents provide good guidance, so I'd start with family and friends, and then sort of reach out and try to find other people, you know, and you have to know what career path you're going on and know your objectives. So if it's a college application, okay, then I can understand that. You know, but just coming to review my resume, well, I look for grammar or white space or spacing or different font sizes, all the stylistic parts of it. Content is hard unless you have a goal. So each time, if you were to come to me, I would expect you to have an agenda for a meeting with me. I'd have to expect goals and be well articulated in what you want to get out of the meeting. My time management is pretty hard, so I want it to be very, very productive and concise. So, but yeah, just what do you want to major in college?
Are you asking? Either biomedical or mechanical engineering.
Okay. Do you know anybody that is a professor in biomedical or what's the other one? Mechanical engineer?
I do not.
You know any professions, people that are professionals that have those degrees?
Yes, I do.
So that's where I would start.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And then if you didn't know, you could come ask me, Dr. Culp, do you know any? I'd say no. And then I'd say, okay, Dr. Block, you know any? Do you see how your network really becomes pretty vast once you start thinking second and third degree people who might know? You know, but I would start with those people. You know, or Lehigh has huge departments in universities. Write a professor.
Yeah.
Say, really interested in medical engineering. I saw your website. Your research looks awesome. Professors like your egos still a little bit. So, you know, I was really hoping you could maybe just take a quick look at my CV or what kind of things do you think would be good? So a lot of times you'll get ignored, but sometimes professors will write back with some key things to do. Other questions? Let's check online. No online questions in the chat box. Looking for questions in the chat box from the online people. All right. Any other questions, parents? Yep.
So regarding like interviews for kind of a medical school or a graduate school, what do you like look for in an applicant? Is it like dependent on the applicant itself, or is it like a uniform set of criteria? Or
so I've only ever interviewed for medical school, and we have a 15 question rubric that we use. That way, you know, you have 24 people interviewing students by using a 15-question rubric. It gets very standardized. So there's certain things on that rubric that we look for. And then there's always the other stuff. I might give somebody higher scores in certain areas because I'm always looking for passion, you know, and that to me goes a long way because if you're passionate about, you know, medicine and want to go to medical school, then you don't mind staying up, studying, working your butt off, missing birthday parties, missing bowling outings with your friends. You minimize those life distractions when you're passionate about it. So, you know, when I can, like tonight, I might work till 10, 10:30 at night, try to catch up before the holidays. I don't consider it work. Consider it just playing fun. So I don't know how every school does it, if it's very standard, but guys in your medical school, it's standard 15 things you look for. I could probably give you the evaluation form if you wanted it, or have Susanna distribute it. So the other thing is you have a 30-minute interview in medical school with usually two professors and a student. We have to try to evaluate you on 15 things in 30 minutes. You're probably telling on an average 4 to 5 different stories. So right away, a lot of people come in, and you just see it. You have all these stories ready to go, so that way you can articulate them well. But then they focus on one attribute in that story. And I say, well, we're only going to get 4 stories. I got to grade you on 15 attributes. From your critical decision making to your what are some of the other ones? Knowledge of local healthcare issues, mission of the school. So once you do that, you can say, okay, how can I wrap 4 or 5 attributes into this one story that I'm going to potentially tell? You don't know what kind of questions they're going to ask, so you got to have about 10 stories lined up. Each one should have a bunch of different attributes you think they might be looking for. You know, lifelong learner, self-directed learner, critical thinking, healthcare issues, local and global healthcare issues. So you have to have stories that encompass all of those things. So each one you should have a strategy for about what attributes and things am I going to do. One of the first questions we ask, I ask, is tell me about the Lumber Institute. I hate it when people come in, I'm like, you haven't even done your research? You're coming in for a job here, you haven't done your research? Or one of the first things we ask you guys in your medical school is, do you know the mission of the medical school? Okay, why do you want to come be a physician here if you don't know our mission? Our mission says we want to repopulate primary care physicians in Northeast Pennsylvania. You know, do you even want to be a primary care physician? I mean, you can see how some of those not doing your homework can turn those interviews south pretty quick. Any other questions? Well, yeah.
Just to comment, thank you very much for a very informative presentation. I know you have mentioned that reflection is a key component in identifying their own traits. What are the, and then one of them is just, obviously they're going to come up with their own idea, through self-introspection, but what are the other ways they can develop a plan to identify their strengths?
Yeah, so that reflection, the way I look at it is they develop a learning plan, they develop a resume, whatever the document is, and then you read it and assess it yourself, and then you have people outside critique it and provide either verbal or written critique of whatever document you want, and then they have to self-assess and reflect, and basically then try again. What worked? What didn't? Try to redo that document and go back to that same person, maybe go to somebody new. All right, well, they said, my time management wasn't very good in my study plan. Okay, let me revise it. All right, now I'm going to go to this person, have them review it. Oh, they still said the study plan is poor, right? And so just getting external feedback and being able to really think about it in a positive way, that this is how you're going to grow. Sort of the plan that I like to do. So for our medical students, we have them make all these documents. They go both to an administrator who's a non-MD, non-PhD, and then they go to an MD, PhD faculty advisor, and so they get 2 different points of view. Somebody with a non-science degree and somebody with a science degree, and usually we meet with the students twice per semester. And then we encourage them to do it with family and friends and other things, but in medical school, that's what we do to help get them going. Okay, well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.